Good morning, everyone, from sunny Quito. It's 9 o'clock here local time. It's actually 8 o'clock in the Galapagos. I don't know what time o'clock it is in your part of the world, but I hope you're listening in. I hope you've got a cup of tea or a cup of coffee with you to be part of this great webinar that we've organised for you today from the Ministry of Tourism. My name is Dominic Hamilton. I'm the Deputy Minister for Tourism Promotion, and in a former existence, I've been a guide. I've been a guidebook writer, a journalist. I've written quite a lot about Galapagos, and I also worked for a tour operator who had ships in the Galapagos and also a hotel. So I don't know how much of an expert I am. You guys will be able to tell me at the end of the webinar, but I hope to do a good job today. And I'm really quite excited about doing this. I haven't done a full webinar before, so if we get muddled at any point, I hope you forgive me. But I'm here with the team here in Quito. We're on Twitter, we're live on the web, and we're going to go straight into the webinar now. Good morning. Right, well, we're going to go start with this lovely picture of an iguana, which is kind of so iconic for the islands, and these islands that we're going to talk about now, and how different they are, how special they are, and really unique is an overused word in the world today, but when you apply it to the Galapagos, it isn't. So here we are. We're going to go through an introduction, then we're going to go through a bit understanding the mechanics of how to visit the Galapagos. And then we'll go through some practical details that you should also take into consideration before finishing the whole webinar with a Q&A session. Do feel free to give us send over your questions during the webinar. And also part of our training idea is that you get a certificate, a Galapagos expert certificate at the end of the webinar if you can answer the questions. So you must pay attention, keep drinking that tea or coffee, and make sure you pay attention so you are able to answer the questions that we've prepared for you at the end of the webinar. You can answer those either online straight away or by email, and then we can send you the certificate corresponding to your intelligence and your attention. So let's go forward with the next part. A bit of a top five reasons why the Galapagos are so special. Why have we got this webinar? Why are you sitting there today? Well, we think the key thing is that with this idea of Darwin, we've got this living laboratory of evolution. So what does that mean? It means it's not a museum. It means it's living. The animals are constantly changing. The animals that you can interact with all the time. It's a laboratory because the islands per se mean that it's kind of separated from the rest of the world, separated by water, and so it has these kind of laboratory conditions that were so favorable for the study of evolution. And evolution as such really it's the birthplace of evolution. This is the place where Charles Darwin in his voyage of the Beagle in the mid-18th century, really it started the evidence that he collected, these observations, he was such a keen observer, those ideas, what he observed in the Galapagos really later enabled him to form the incredible theory of evolution, which really revolutionized our view of the world and our place in it. I think, as you can see in this photo, the idea of natural close encounters with amazing, unique species. Here you can see children. They're just about at the limit of how close you should be, as the naturalist guides tell you to be about 1.5 meters away, 2 meters away. But it shows you how wonderful the experience of being close to wildlife is. There are very few places in the world, to my knowledge, where wildlife doesn't run away because it thinks you're going to put it in a cooking pot. Wildlife sits there, looks at you, and you can interact with it, and that's a wonderful feeling. Truly unlike anywhere else. As we said, unique is an overused word, but the Galapagos really are unlike anywhere else, and I think that's a great factor in its favour. I think we also have a world-class example of sustainability and management of a natural destination. Of course, there are challenges to that. They're going to be wherever humans are, but I still think the Galapagos is an incredible example of what can be done. And also, I think Galapagos is a great destination because you can combine it very easily with the mainland of Ecuador, with all the wonders that we've got there. We'll talk a bit about that later. So let's go back a bit. Let's talk about the history just to get a grip on that. The Galapagos weren't discovered until the kind of mid 16th century when a bishop from Panama got blown completely off course going up the Pacific coast and ended up 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers out in the middle of the sea and ended up in what he would call the Enchanted Isles. But that was made, they could translate it as bewitched as well because there was no wind and he got stuck there. It took him ages to get back. And after that, we had various people used the Galapagos, but they're not very interested in it because there wasn't any fresh water. So they had buccaneers and pirates used it to escape from the Spanish while they were pillaging for gold and loot along the coast. And finally, just before Darwin's arrival, Ecuador declares the Galapagos part of its national territory. And then Darwin actually only spent 5 weeks, you might think, because of how famous and how strong the association between the English naturalist and the islands is, that he actually spent longer, but he only spent 5 weeks and only actually visited a few of the islands, but they were the islands that would change the world. And then nobody was particularly interested in the Galapagos, again, due to the lack of fresh water, and no one was particularly so enamored with nature or knew its importance at that time. And another date to look out for is that in the Second World War, it was used as a US military base. If the Americans had lost the Battle of Midway against Japan, then the next place they would have been fighting in the Pacific was Galapagos, which is quite a scary thought, but it never happened. It wasn't really until the 1959 that the Galapagos really came onto the radar of the world when a coalition, let's say, of interested scientists and dedicated conservationists at really the dawn of conservation ideas in the world got together and with the Ecuadorian government declared the Galapagos a national park in 1959, which was really quite a long way back, and then began the research station in 1964. And we've got a picture of the long departed, or recently departed Lonesome George, who's just taught us that no one knew how old he was, but he became very iconic because he was the last of his species. In 1978, and then UNESCO declared the Galapagos a World Heritage Site, and in 1984, the whole of the vast marine reserve, you have to remember, not just the land, but it's also the marine reserve, were declared natural World Heritage Sites by Galapagos. By UNESCO. Just quickly over the overview, we're going to look at some maps, but it's very useful to remember where the Galapagos are, right? You just find the equator and run your finger along it and you'll find them off the west coast of South America. And there's a land area of about 8,000 kilometers. And then we have the figure for the marine reserve. There's a huge marine reserve. It's about the second or third biggest in the world. Great Barrier Reef, there's another marine reserve in Belize, along the Belizean coast, and the one on Galapagos is the next biggest one. It's massive. And it's a very key point to we'll come back to, 97% of the land territory is protected by a national park, and all of the marine reserve as well. So the only fishing that happens is very limited, kind of artisanal fishing. And the population, maybe more than some people realize, is at 26,000, and we have 4 inhabited islands that we'll look at again now. But people often ask, when's the best time to Galapagos? Well, the answer is any time. Any month is really a fantastic time to go. It's one of the benefits of visiting. It's one of the benefits of being able to sell it. No one can say, oh, we don't want to go in that month. You really, that every month has something different going on as well in terms of wildlife, although, of course, everything in nature is unpredictable. So as you can see, whether you're thinking in Fahrenheit or you're thinking in centigrade, you've got a pretty median temperature throughout the year. And also it's interesting to note the water temperature. So there is a slight variation, but really it's pretty minimal. And that only really translates as say in June, July, August, when the water is a bit cooler, lots of the boats give you shorty wetsuits, the thin wetsuits, and neoprene wetsuits in order for you to be comfortable longer in the water. Whereas when you're in February or March, when you've got 25 degree seas, you really don't need it. You've got fantastic snorkeling. Really, any time of year is great for snorkeling, and we'll see it's one of the favorite activities here in the Galapagos. The reason for knowing how the seasons work is a complicated slide I'm going to show you now, and I'm not going to test you on that later. But the most important current that you can see is actually the one that's coming up from the Peru coastal current, known as the Humboldt current. That's the one that comes up from Antarctica. So as you can imagine, it's very cold, but it brings in a huge amount of nutrients because cold water is denser and it carries more nutrients, and therefore the whole food chain, the marine food chain, chases after these nutrients, all this krill, etc., that's in the water. and it comes up the coast of the western coast of South America, and it butts up against, you can just see how it gets pushed out by the kind of chin of Ecuador there, and it gets pushed out to Galapagos. And that's why the Galapagos in many ways is such a rich marine environment and therefore land environment, is because you've got this huge amount of nutrients that are in the water. But of course, when the Humboldt current wanes at certain times of year, coming into what would be the December, January, and the waters become warmer and you get a different set of nutrients and different things happening in the islands. But don't worry, no one's going to test you on the currents. Talking about community conservation, it's very important to recognize all the efforts that have been done down the years. We talked about the establishment of the Charles Darwin Research Station back in the 60s, the various Galapagos laws that govern the islands and everything that happens in them. And at the end, we'll see also from a practical point of view for the traveler what that means in terms of the controls that you have before you actually get to the Galapagos. But there have been some very serious and successful efforts, for example, in recycling, and the Galapagos authorities recently banned plastic bags, which is about time too, and polyurethane foam containers as well. And you'll see many hotels don't use plastic water bottles either, and it's a good idea to bring your own water bottle and keep filling it up as you go around the Galapagos. Don't create any more trash. Another theme along the theme of sustainability is the new airport on Baltra Island. As we'll see, there are two airports in Galapagos, and one of them is on Baltra, and they rebuilt the airport, and it really is quite a brilliant structure and very well thought out in terms of its ecological footprint, and it has the LEED certification for green building. Galapagos, of course, has won more awards than Robert De Niro in terms of recognitions around the world, and it's regularly on all sorts of bucket lists and things to see before you die, and best places for wildlife, best places to dive, all sorts of lists. So it's always in the news one way or another, which makes it a good reason for you to improve your knowledge and to sell the destination as well. So, as the booby says, let's do it. We'll go on to understanding a bit about how we travel around the Galapagos now, and what kind of activities we've got to enjoy as well. So just where are the Galapagos? Here's and how do you get to them? You can see the western coast of South America there, and various flights. If you're from Australia, then you're flying normally across to Chile, but also there's a flight with Qantas to Argentina and to Brazil. You could come across that way. From South America, we've got very good connections as well. And also looking at Europe, there are various ways to get to Ecuador and connections. And from the States, we currently have 73 flights a week from 4 different airports. And I'm pleased to announce we'll also be, JetBlue will be flying from Fort Lauderdale. So February 2016. So that's another frequency that's being added. And they're flying into the airport in Quito, which is about 2 years old, and the very good airport, which the whole passenger part of the airport in Guayaquil, Ecuador's second city, is also excellent and has been winning various awards. So there are 2 options for flying into Ecuador that we'll see, and some pretty good connections. We'd love British Airways, Lufthansa, if you're listening, please do start flying direct to Quito very soon. We'd all love you here. As we said, we've got these 2 cities, so Quito and Guayaquil, and connections between the 2. So, and connections between the 2 Galapagos airports. One of them was Baltra, which we saw now, having a completely rebuilt ecological airport. And the other one you can see, which is a bit more to the southeast, is on San Cristobal Island. It's called Puerto Vaquerizo Moreno. We're not going to test you on that. So there are actually various ways of flying to the Galapagos. LAN has a direct flight from Quito to Baltra, and Guayaquil also has its flights. So sometimes you might find yourself on a plane. It depends how you book it or which tour operator you're working with. The flight will fly down from Quito, which is only a 40-minute flight, and it's downhill from the Andes, so it's faster on the way down, of course. And then you have a short wait on the tarmac, and then you continue on to one of the 2 airports. And as we'll see, it's possible that you may get to know both airports during your time in the Galapagos. Some cruises will understand why later, come into Baltar, and then they do their itinerary and they come out of San Cristobal from Puerto Vaquerizo. So don't worry if that you've got two airports on your ticket or your client's ticket. That's perfectly normal and just means that they'll see a different part of the archipelago in a different town as well. Right, so that's how we got to the Galapagos. I think it's interesting to look at the whole archipelago as this amazing places, this kind of spots in the middle of the Pacific, 800 miles outside of the western Pacific coast. And these are islands that are born of fire. They're not connected to any other upheaval like the Andes are. They're beneath a hot spot, this volcanic hot spot that is between these two tectonic plates, caused by the tectonic plates movements, right? And something that people don't realize is how active they are. These are very, very young in terms of a geological time. These are very young islands that are still in the throes of creation. And the proof of that was this photo that was taken only 2 days ago. And this is the island on Isabella Island. I'll go back, the island that looks like a seahorse, which is to the west. And in the head of the seahorse is this great big volcano called Volcano Wolf. And that's exploding, erupting at the moment. It causes no danger. As you can see, the passengers on board one of the yachts are enjoying what is truly one of nature's most amazing shows, exhibitions of its strength. And these are one of the most amazing experiences you could probably have as a traveler in any part of the world, let alone in the Galapagos. But I think it's important to realize that the Galapagos are still active. And I'm not going to go into the whole geology of the islands and the archipelago, but it's truly amazing. And I would always recommend that you read up well on the Galapagos before your journey in order to enrich your experience. And also, of course, to probably go with a cruise that, or make sure that your guide or the operator that takes you around is really as knowledgeable as possible about the whole islands, and that will enrich your experience. We're going to look a bit about all the options now that we have. I think there are various options, which is why this kind of webinar is great for you to understand the spectrum available. And I think it's key to understand, obviously, your clients' needs. Are they young, active people? Do they have families? What age are the children? What kind of activities can they do? Are they more senior visitors? Are they going to be comfortable on the trails, etc.? And I think that's a key part of start with what your client's, the client profile is, and then try and see, according to the options, what will suit them best and how they're going to have the best and most fulfilling experience. So what we're going to do is actually start. Here's an overview of all the archipelago again and the inhabited islands that we have. There are 4, as we mentioned, some more inhabited, let's say, than others. I think Santa Cruz there in the middle is probably the most important in terms of population. That has the island of Baltra just to the north. On the northern tip is the most important airport that we've seen. And on the southern side, you have the port of Puerto Llora, which is the most populous town in the Galapagos. And following that to the east is San Cristobal, off to the right, which has Puerto Vaquerizo and the other airport. Floriana down to the south, the yellow one, is really has a teeny weeny population of I think only about 300 people. And then off to the west, you have Isabella, the seahorse island, which has a port called Puerto Villamil, which is on the southern coast. And that's again a very small population. And as we've said, of all of those islands that you can see before you, only 3% of them are available for human habitation, and everything else is part of the national park. So when you have these populations, you've obviously got a hotel offer of varying degrees on varying islands. It's a good idea to investigate what's available. On Floriana, for example, there are no big hotels. The hotels are the lodges. They're pretty much lodges. They're pretty basic, I would say. On Isabella, there's a bit more offer at the moment, and improving hotel infrastructure. So look into what's going on. The most hotel offer, of course, is in the most populous port of Puerto Llora. So when you're talking about a land-based option, as we do in Galapagos, we're going to then pass on to the cruise-based option. It's important to think about how your clients are going to spend their time during the day. and I think they've got options whether they can be on the islands of where the hotel is. So in the case of Puerto Ayora, it would be on Santa Cruz, but also the options to do day tours. So from Puerto Ayora, for example, you've got various options of islands that can be visited within the national park. And the latter part is very key. The best wildlife opportunities, the most amazing sites, arguably, are within the national park. And if you want to have the interaction with the animals that we talked about that make Galapagos so special, then you really need to get into the national park. So you need to start investigating what options exist for day trips with tour operators, with your hotel that you're booking your clients on. And so that's definitely worth looking. You can package everything together or do it separately. You know, you can kind of tailor your time, your client's time better. And depending, as we said, on their profile, on the activities that they'd like to take part in. Here's a lovely shot of the highlands of Santa Cruz and the benefits of staying on the land. You know, the interaction with the island, the people, and perhaps with all its environment, which in the Galapagos, with altitude and being on the equator, islands change radically in just a few hundred meters of elevation. So when we say there's different environments, they really are. They're lush, humid highlands and arid coasts that can be enjoyed. I think also there's another point about you know, being on the islands and the time to meet the locals, understand local life and local law and local history, and that's another something else that is interesting for people to experience and not just. Whereas on a boat, obviously you're on a boat and you're having fun with everybody on board the boat, but you're not meeting the locals so much. There's something that has developed over the last years that's called, we call island hopping, and here's a rough idea of how it works. Let's say how the islands can be connected that we saw. You might start in San Cristobal, you might spend a couple of days there, kayak around the bay and see some giant tortoises, and then you might go across to Puerto Ayora and see the Charles Darwin Research Station, and you might even consider going across to another island. These are all connected by fast speedboats, and the journey times are about between 2 and 3 hours, sometimes more if the seas are quite rough. It's not as recommended for people who suffer from seasickness as the larger yachts, but certainly good fun and a different way of seeing the islands. Here I would like to talk about the Galapagos cruise option. So we've looked at, if you stay in a hotel on land, what options you have, whether that's on the same island or visiting a nearby island. And here it's interesting, the traditional way, quote unquote, of seeing the Galapagos is still in a yacht, and you've got various options for doing that. We can, there are sailing boats, as you can see here, as well as catamarans in the Galapagos. And they have, you know, there's benefits, there's pros and cons of all these types of transportation. So that it's certainly very characterful. So it might be lovely to be on a sailboat with the rigging, etc. But probably your cabin accommodation isn't as comfortable as bigger yachts or different configurations of yachts. And here we've got kayaking, which is a lovely activity that many boats, but not all, have on board so that people can enjoy them as part of their exploration. Here we've got what would be termed the medium yachts in the Galapagos, which are normally there's a kind of bevy of yachts that are between 30 and 50 passengers, that in Galapagos terms are medium yachts. And then we also have only 4 of these larger yachts that are between 90 and 100 passengers. And again, you have to weigh up the pros and cons. There are many benefits to being on board a larger yacht. Certainly they're much more stable, which is an advantage for guests who might be worried about the seasickness part of it. You can often make groups. If you're with children, it's more likely that you'll find other families with children on a bigger yacht just by sheer numbers. And there are things that you can talk to your Galapagos tour operator about the various options that exist. But the good thing is there are various options available. So it's worth researching, and it's worth feeling comfortable of the operator that you're sending, or the boat owner that you're sending your clients with. And basically, we've got the way that Galapagos tourism has been set up as we go around the archipelago. We'll look a bit at how these itineraries work. Small groups of up to 16 passengers are led by a guide, and you go along trails. Some of them this is quite a formal trail in Galapagos terms, going, I think that's actually in the Charles Darwin Centre. And other ones are much more informal. They're just a few black and white wooden pegs on the side of between rocks, and you're strolling around between those. But obviously there are strict rules that the naturalist guides will tell you about, but that's how it works. So in the morning, you're visiting an island. These are some of all the terrestrial sites that we have within the national park. You can see these are all the marine sites, which can be for scuba diving or simply for snorkeling as well. So that gives you an idea of the breadth, and you might have 80 licensed boats at the moment, but they're all moving around the archipelago, visiting lots of sites all the time. So and the national park has done a complete and very rigorous study of the carrying capacity, or how many boats and people can visit one place at one time. So it's important to know that you're never going to be, there's no such thing as mass tourism in the Galapagos. It's a very intimate and let's say curated experience, and with minimal impact on the environment. So just to get an idea of how these itineraries work, this is a 6-day cruise. So it may start in Puerto Vaquerizo, it would go down to the south to Española. And if you look carefully at Española, down in the southeast there are actually 2 landing sites. So that means that in the morning the boat will land at the beautiful Gardner Bay, and then in the afternoon, while you're having lunch, it'll chug over with a lovely landscape to Punta Suarez on the western coast, which is one of the best sites in the Galapagos. And guests will have another opportunity to disembark. You'll take your, in the morning you can take snorkeling gear, you can just laze around on the beach with lovely sea lions. In the afternoon is a longer trail, but again, they're different trails. And then in the afternoon, you're back on board. So that's a typical kind of day in the Galapagos. The same as we go further west to Floriana, the same kind of mechanism works again, where in the morning there'll be an activity, a visit. You might do a dinghy, a panga ride around the rocks to find certain species. You might do some snorkeling, and then you might do a long trail, a short trail, a rocky trail. You might be on the beach. So every day is different. Some boats have kayaks, of course, as we mentioned, and that's basically how you go around the archipelago. It's important to realize, again, we talked about how big the marine reserve was, and Galapagos really is huge. So having a boat to explore it enables you to see all sorts of different environments. So that's an idea of what a 6-day cruise like. Here's what a 5-day one might look like, going all the way up to Genovesa in the northeast, a beautiful rocky island up there. And this is what a longer 6-day cruise would look like, going all the way around the Seahorse of Isabella, which is a fantastic way to see the islands. And then don't forget, you can combine any of these cruises, as we saw. So if you were to stay, this is what the boat does over its 15-day itinerary. It goes all the way around, and you can obviously stay on board for that whole thing, which would be pretty amazing. And you would see absolutely every species to be seen by the end of it, or else you could combine 2 sections of it. And the other option, of course, which shouldn't be forgotten, which has become popular, and I would actually recommend it, is to combine a cruise, whether a long one, a 6-day or 7-day or 5-day, and then maybe think about where. It's important to know where your cruise ends in order to know which hotel you might go to, and maybe have a bit more time, a bit more independent time, a bit more downtime, have a swim in a swimming pool, go for a walk, that kind of thing. It's a lovely way to combine 2 ways of seeing Galapagos. So onto the activities section, which is there are all sorts of things you can be up to in the Galapagos. As you saw from the images before and the way the itineraries work, you're going to be walking around, you're going to be different distances. Here's a good shot to explain it. This is the top of Bartolomé Island, a beautiful iconic space in the Galapagos. And here you can see the guests have walked up here. Depending on your physical condition, you might get there a bit out of breath, or you might get there fine. But it's a short walk, and you can see in the middle of the picture, to the left of the spiky rock, there's a lovely curve of arc of sand, which is the beach at Bartolomé. So a typical visit there would combine that visit up to the top of the hill to get the view, and with some time where you disembark with a wet landing onto the beach and have some time there, and you can do some great snorkeling if you're lucky. You might see penguins at that rock, and you might see small sharks, white-tipped reef sharks as well. It's completely not dangerous, and so wonderful Galapagos opportunities, very rare, just in the morning. Here's a lovely shot to get you to understand how close and how fearless the animals really are. There's a bunch of black iguanas, imps of darkness, as Darwin called them, here on the rocks, and completely not nonchalant towards the humans, the bipeds, sunburnt bipeds who are exploring the island off here. I think that looks like Fernandina, which is way over to the west, one of the youngest. It's a beautiful place to be, and that's the magic of the Galapagos. And the other magical thing that lots of people, if you say, ask for someone who's been to the Galapagos, maybe some of you listening have been, that people will always say, wow, snorkeling with sea lions, one of the best things we did. Snorkeling in general is an amazing activity to do. Just put a mask on, flippers, and a snorkel, and you're away. You don't need to scuba dive or be particularly experienced to really have an amazing experience of the underwater marine world of Galapagos, to understand it a bit more. And of course, you're taken around by a guide who knows what he's doing. You're accompanied by a dinghy who's always nearby. You can wear an extra life vest if you're not that confident in the water, if you just want to plonk your head in, but really an opportunity not to be missed. And sometimes on some boats, you might be going, twice a day on a snorkel. Here are the hikes that we talked about through the volcanic landscapes. Here's actually the beach at Bartolomé that I mentioned, and you can go off snorkeling from there or simply relax for a bit. All sorts of flora to explore and understand and investigate, very curious flora that you'll find in Galapagos. Of course, bird life is one of the richest parts of the Galapagos, of its lovely natural riches. And here are the two waved albatrosses that mate for life, and they're fencing. They do a lovely kind of dance to remind each other how much they love each other. And there's something you can observe at certain times of the year, as well as lots of other different animal behavior. Here, whales, if you're very lucky in the Galapagos, you might be able to see orcas, the killer whales, or Wright's whales, all sorts of whales. The best time to see them is actually coming up now, so beginning from June, round to about September, when the colder waters from the Humboldt bring up these nutrients, they bring the whales too, but you might be lucky to see them at any time. So it's also a good idea to be on deck and checking out what's happening in the water when you're navigating through the Galapagos, because you never know what you might see. Of course, at night time, you've got lovely stargazing, all sorts of stars from both the northern and southern hemispheres to enjoy. Surfing is something you can't do from a boat, but you would do it from land, which is growing in popularity. These ocean currents, you've got all sorts of waves to enjoy. Kayaking, I think, is a lovely way to explore the island. You can do it from various inhabited islands, and also some boats have kayaks on board, and it's a really relaxing way to explore. Mountain biking, maybe not so relaxing. There's various options on the inhabited islands as well for going up into the highlands, for instance, if you're being more of a mountain biker. And actually in Puerto Ayora, most people get around on the bike, so you can be a bit like a local. As we said, scuba diving, wonderful way. It's often voted, the best place in the world to scuba dive, or certainly in the top 10. And you need to investigate a bit more. There are two ways of doing it. One is a liveaboard boat, where you're on board a boat navigating the islands for a week, and the other way is to do it from one of the ports. So you would stay in a hotel and go off on day dives, maybe 1 or 2 dives in a day. And food is always going to be an experience, not really an activity, but it's certainly an experience. And in Galapagos, the culinary scene is growing in stature every year. And of course, needless to say, if you're right out in the middle of the Pacific, the seafood is going to be pretty amazing. So on to a bit of nuts and bolts, how to do it, some useful travel tips. As we said, the maximum group size is 16 per passenger according to the national park, but there might be some operators who can offer a better guide to passenger ratio, so that would be something I would definitely consider, because it's so important to have the natural history interpretation of a guide. So a boat that may offer you 12 passengers to a guide would certainly be an advantage, something to take into consideration. You can't eat on the islands, you can't smoke on the islands, you can drink water on the islands, although you can't give water to everybody else, and you have to be off them by 6 o'clock, by about sundown. It's the rule in the Galapagos. You've got two types of landing that you might come across in the literature, dry and wet. So taking walking shoes and Tiva type of sandals, I think, are brilliant for the Galapagos. So don't really worry about putting them on and off when you get off the dinghy on the shore. I think the Galapagos is a great family destination. If you think, I think it's one of the few places where if you tell the headmaster of your school that you're taking time off school to take the children to Galapagos is one of the few places in the world where probably he or she will probably approve your decision. But I would say, in general, if you're on a boat, certainly you need. It would be wise to have children above 7. Most tour operators would ask the same in terms of the group dynamics, etc. It's tougher having younger children, but it can be done. And certainly from a hotel, that would be probably a more convenient where mum and dad can be more independent and do things according to their children's times and not how the ship's operations work. And of course, all the national park rules should be obeyed. In terms of nuts and bolts, as we said, there are various controls and checks and balances on the Galapagos, and one of them is the transit card, which it's advisable that if beforehand passengers can fill out the forms beforehand online using that website that we've got there, and but they've still got to fill out the last bits of details at the airport, whether Quito or Guayaquil, and pay $20, and then they will go through a check. Which is to try and control the species coming into Galapagos, very important. So they'll make sure you're not taking any fruit, for example, is the main thing that they're looking out for. Your bags will be checked, everybody's bags are checked. And then there's a Galapagos National Park fee, which you pay upon arrival in Galapagos at one of the 2 airports. And it's very important to know that you have to pay it in cash. And there are some cash machines in the Galapagos now, but not actually that near where you'll be or your passengers will be. So really, it is really key. Some tour operators will include that, so you could consider doing it that way, where as part of your fee, your passengers know already that they don't have to worry about having any cash. And although the Galapagos is only open to domestic flights, there are no international flights. You can get a lovely stamp as a souvenir of the national park when you go in. And just in case you were wondering, there is no way as a tourist to get between the mainland and the Galapagos. There's only cargo ships that go backwards and forwards. So the only option, just to be clear, is to take flights. That was the souvenir stamp. Sorry. Finally, to round things up, it's important to remember that Galapagos is only one of the 4 worlds that Ecuador has to offer. We've also got the Andes, where we're doing this webinar from. There's a bright and beautiful morning here in the Andes. We're actually very high up, 2,800 meters, 10,000 feet. You've also got a pretty wonderful Pacific coast, which again is important to investigate a bit, know where you're going, what time of year you're visiting because of the currents, but really an unexplored region, very rich in culture, some wonderful cuisine as well. And then we're going to, hopefully you'll join us in July, we're going to look at the Amazon region, which Ecuador is one of the countries that shares the Amazon watershed, and we'll touch on those in the next webinar. So don't forget, either before the Galapagos, most people do their trip on the mainland in Ecuador before and end with the highlights of Galapagos, but obviously you can work things around any which way, and do make sure you investigate the other webinars that we have online to find out more about those regions. They'll find webinars about Quito, about Guayaquil, about Cuenca, about the wonderful railways and all the regeneration that's been done, and the options that exist, and how you would then combine those with your trip out to the Galapagos from the 2 airports. Remember, you've got 2 airports to choose from both Quito and to Guayaquil. So do make all the use you can of the website that we have tailored for you guys of the trade, the travel agents, tour operators, and also media. If you've got media friends that you want to interest them about Ecuador and everything it has to offer, please do send them that link as well. There you'll find repositories of the magazine that we've been publishing in its digital version, newsletters, special features, and you'll also find the backups of all these webinars, whether in PowerPoint presentation without my croaky voice, sorry about that, or with my croaky voice if you'd like to hear it with that as well. So it's a great tool, and we hope you'll do send us your feedback. We hope it's being useful for you. We'd like to open up now we're going to have give us some feedback about how we've done today. I think I was talking a bit fast at the beginning. I hope you kept up with me, and I hope we've managed to give you some good insights about why the Galapagos is special, how you can explore it, these different options. Again, look at your guest profile, what they like to do, etc. And we'd like you at this point to tell us give us your idea about the yes or no. How useful has this webinar been to you? You can be brutally honest. I won't take offence. I have 3 children. They insult me all the time, so I'm not going to take it personally. But it's really important for us to hear about you. We're just going to keep this running for a few a moment in order to get your votes in. Thank you very much. And in the meantime, I think we'll tell you about the next webinar that we have coming up, which is about the Amazon region. And again, I think it's important to know, as a travel agent, we're going to do our best to give you those insights and that knowledge to help you sell the destination better. Of course, the best thing you can do is come down, whether on a fan trip organised by us in the Ministry of Tourism, which we have a few from various markets, or else with your partnering up with a local DMC and with an airline in order to come and experience it. But in the meantime, or if you'd like to reinforce the knowledge because you have already come down to Ecuador, then we've got this webinar about the Amazon. And again, there are river cruises on the Amazon now. There are lodges up and down various rivers. There are now options that are close by to the main roads of Ecuador. So the road infrastructure has improved in leaps and bounds, really transformed the country, and also what you can do in it as a tourist. So we've got there are parts of the Amazon that are literally only about 3.5 hours drive, 4 hours drive from Quito, which is pretty amazing. So we're all the way up in the Andes, and you can move all the way back down in the Amazon. And so don't miss that. We'll let you know when that's happening in July. Thank you very much for all your votes. I think we've done pretty well. We're now going to go across to looking at some of the questions and answers. We've got some nice comments. Thank you so much. We're really pleased to hopefully be of service to you. I'm sure you've got many more questions that we're going to be able to answer today. Galapagos is a destination that you're not going to sail tomorrow. You're going to need to talk to local tour operators, boat operators, etc. And we've got a question about the eruption on Volcan Wolf up in the north of Isabella, which I think it's really amazing now that you can be so close to the throes of creation. If you're sitting there in North America, you'll remember Mount St. Helens and how destructive that was. But in the case of Galapagos, because we said so little of the Galapagos is inhabited, it's very rare for any of the volcanic eruptions to pose a threat to man. They can obviously pose a threat to the wildlife that is there. And you've asked for an update. I'm sorry, I didn't check the last news items this morning, but I believe that the pink iguanas will be all right. And this is a hybrid of the land iguana, a very curious species which the laboratory of evolution that Galapagos creates at times. But I haven't got the latest information. You have to forgive me at the moment. The map, I think you'll be able to get it inside the PowerPoint. You'll be able to use it. There are other maps that also you can find online, or talk to a tour operator that will be able to send it over so you can study it in detail. And the webinar, yes, as we said, it will be recorded. So we're just running through the questions, and it will be on that link, the trade. All you need is ecuador.travel/en/webinars, or you can just do all you need is ecuador.travel/trade, and you'll get through to it anyway. What was the name of the area where there was a beautiful bike at the top of the view of that arched bay with the spiky rock? It's Bartolomé. It's one of the iconic islands on the Galapagos. It's actually, you can get there as a day trip from Puerto Ayora. So not all of the boats, there are only a few licensed boats, as we talked about, that can go into the national park as such, beyond just a little bootle around the bay. You need to, if you really want to get into the national park, then you can get to Bartolomé. It's quite a long cruise. It takes about 2 hours in a yacht to get there. It's a beautiful cruise, and then you can, as we said, it's a lovely visitor site because you can combine this really amazing volcanic view with the spiky rock called Pinnacle Rock, with a swim around the bay and maybe getting up close and personal with some penguins there. Really magical experience. We're looking at the pictures. It looks like these tours would not be recommended for clients with mobility issues. That's a good question. I think it's going to be hard to answer fully on this occasion, but thank you. I think it's something you need to talk more closely with with tour operators about, because as we've seen, there's a huge variety of landing sites and activities and trails that can be undertaken in the Galapagos. So I wouldn't rule out that possibility. I think that you can still, with the right tour operator, the right person guiding you in terms of the choices that you make. It obviously depends on the mobility issue and the severity of the mobility issue that we're talking about. But I wouldn't rule it out at all. And I think, of course, hopefully someone can get a huge amount out of their visit to Galapagos, even if they do have some kind of impairment. We will be sending you follow-up. You've asked for the links, etc. We will be sending those through to you. And also at the end of the webinar, you'll have the questions that we're going to ask you and that you have to answer in order to obtain your Galapagos Expert Certificate. And those will also go out by email. So don't worry if you're wondering about where the questions are. Those will go out by email. Which island is most populated? I think I've answered that. It's on Santa Cruz. So the population of Puerto Ayora is about 22,000, if my memory serves me right. So quite big. There's a whole population. You've got banks, cash points. You've got hospitals. A bit of nightlife, I suppose, by Galapagos standards. So that's the most populous island. But you've got a real range because Floriana, as we said, there's only a few families there, only adding up to about 300 people and a few giant tortoises. What happened to Lonesome George? He just died of old age. No one killed him, no one kidnapped him. He didn't fall off a cliff. He just died of old age, but I think he's an icon. I would recommend, and we didn't put a reading list on this webinar, for which I apologize, but there's a good book by Henry Nichols called Lonesome George Conservation Icon. There you go, and it's got the whole down on who Lonesome George was, why is he important to conservation. He's become this icon because he was the last species, and he didn't mate with anybody else. They didn't find a mate. That was the tragedy of his life. And so he died, and with him went his whole species. So he's an example to man of how we should better manage our natural resources. Which is reading. La, la, la. Yes, it's someone asking for more details. I'm sorry, in the time that we have, I can't go through all the hotels and the operators and the species. We can certainly see. We haven't scheduled another Galapagos webinar at the moment, but obviously we also have a tourism directory inside the website. On that link, you'll be able to find a tourism directory where we do list dozens of hotels and tour operators who are all accredited by the Ministry of Tourism. Obviously, they can run the whole gamut in terms of budget, and maybe we can schedule another webinar where we can go into even more nuts and bolts with you guys, because I know that you're looking to understand how things work even a bit more than we've managed to do today. Are the blue-footed boobies or the albatross more exciting during the mating season? Yes, is the answer to that. As we said, Mother Nature doesn't obey the best laid plans that tour operators might lay before her. So to say, well, they'll be mating at this time of year is tough. But there are times of year when the albatrosses are certainly doing their fencing, it's not a dance, they do it with their beaks. And when the blue-footed boobies, you would have seen the dancers. If anybody's going to the Expo Milan, the World Fair in Milan all this summer, we've got a whole theme about dancing like a booby, and they do this quite comical dance, the males kind of showing off to the females. So yes, talk to a tour operator about when the better time to see the one, when it's more likely. You can't ever say in Galapagos that you will see anything, but you can certainly say you're more likely to see something. And if the albatross, which are on Española, on Punta Suarez, are the easiest place to see them. If they're if you want to combine, if that's a really big thing for one of your clients, is a really keen bird watcher, then definitely talk to a tour operator when they're there, when they might be seen. Does the national park cover the non-inhabited islands? No, it covers everything. So as we saw of the 4 inhabited islands, there are tiny little pockets around Puerto Ayora, or the southern part of Santa Cruz Island, the very small pocket around Puerto Villamil, the highlands, up to Sierra Negra volcano on Isabella that are part of that are not part of the national park, and everything else that we saw is part of the national park. What's the nearest main hospital in case of medical problems for tourists on board? The best nearest hospital is the one at Puerto Ayora. There's a public hospital there, and there are private clinics as well. So if there are any medical issues, people will be taken there. And there's also a hyperbaric chamber in Puerto Ayora. Don't think there are on other islands, to my knowledge. So that might be a reason if you want to be particularly careful if you're going to do scuba diving, then go out in and out from Puerto Ayora, where if anything. If you had any problems with nitrogen, then you would be able to get to the hyperbaric chamber very quickly. And again, something to consider regarding health, the medium in terms of Galapagos and larger boats will have medical officers on board. They'll have physicians on board, which is something that smaller ships aren't able to do because of their size. So that's something to consider. If you have older guests or guests with a certain medical condition, then they would feel more assured and in better hands, then certainly I think that's something to consider. All right, sorry. Anyway, if you touch on the national park fees, if we prepay these to tour operators, do our clients still need to stand in line to purchase, or is the tour operator able to pre-purchase this permit so our clients don't have to wait? Well, good question. You've obviously done this somewhere else in part of the world. But there aren't there's not much VIP treatment just on the day that you go to Galapagos. There isn't really a fast track. If you prepay it, then you still, your tour operator can help your clients through the process, but they'll still have to queue when they arrive at Baltra Airport. But in case people did it a few years ago and they were at the old airport that was really not big enough for the volume of people arriving in the Galapagos, the new airport it's pretty fast and it's pretty painless. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. And certainly something you would maybe want to consider if you've got travel, agencies, to make sure that your boat operator or your tour operator that's putting together the package helps your clients through the Guayaquil or the Quito airport side, the departure side. I think it's nice to have someone holding your hand and showing you, okay, now you need to do your luggage inspection, okay, and this is what, make sure you fill out this form on the way over on the flight, and have a pen handy. Taking a pen is a good idea, and sunblock and sun hat and very good sunglasses. Those are my top 4 tips for Galapagos. Take a pen for your forms, take sunglasses, because the light is very strong. You're on the sea, you definitely need a sun hat, and you definitely need sunblock. You're right on the equator. How should we answer an inquiry regarding excess usage of the natural resource by visitors? What is the realistic answer that keeps them hooked with the idea of low impact? I think there are lots of ways of answering that. I think the distribution, we talked about how the national park, actually in 2012, the tour operators in Ecuador listening might be able to remember, there was a whole change of how to better distribute the yachts that are going around the Galapagos. So they now run on these 15-day itineraries, and I think the huge number of visitor sites, the 69 terrestrial visitor sites and all across 15 islands and islets, means that there's never too many people doing too much damage. And I think the Galapagos National Park has done a good job in working with the tour industry of reconciling the needs of the two sectors. So whether it's tourists visiting the islands and conservation, I think the Ministry of Tourism definitely believes, and we've been working very closely with the authorities and the various other public entities on making sure we find that balance, because the long-term sustainability of the Galapagos is everybody's aim, particularly the government, but of course also the private tour operators who make their living. I think there will be changes in the Galapagos in terms of the immigration was something that came up when Galapagos, when UNESCO took it off temporarily the World Heritage List. One of the things that they highlighted was the problem with migration, which I do think has been tackled. The other problem they highlighted was the invasive species coming into the Galapagos, which is a problem. And there was also the authorities tightened all the controls on the Galapagos, where all the cargo ships, etc. And I think that was done to the satisfaction of UNESCO, and therefore it came off the World Heritage List. I think that's something also that can be highlighted. And I think people, again, to answer the question, people should shop around. They should look for tour operators or boat owners that have good green credentials that can be proved. Please, don't just take the word. Are you involved in beach cleanup? What exactly you do? Do you have water bottles on board? What's your air conditioning system like? Do you have make sure everybody uses four-stroke outboard engines that the Galapagos brought in a few years ago? What are your engines? Are they the newer engines are going to be more efficient? They're not going to cause so much impact, for instance. So I think a savvy travel agent will be able to should be making the right questions, because those are, I think, are genuine questions that their clients are going to have. As we haven't really touched on, Galapagos is an expensive destination. If you're looking at a family of four North Americans, by the time they've paid their flights and by the time they come down to Ecuador and flown over to Galapagos, paid the national park, and they're on a boat, you could be talking quite easily a $20,000 holiday. So the profile of the people who are going to spend that kind of money are more sophisticated people, they're educated people, they've traveled the world, they live and breathe green issues or questions of transparency as consumers day by day. And I think those are questions that they're going to have when choosing a Galapagos tour operator and the kind of holiday that they want. And so therefore, you have to make sure that the tour operators, boat owners and hoteliers, if you're going for the land-based option, what are they doing to lessen the impact on the Galapagos? Great. Well, I think we've done a good job. We've got a few words of thanks. Alan Cook, hello. He's gone now, but he said he's looking forward to the webinar. And we'd just like to thank you for being with us today. I hope we've done a good job. Give us your feedback. Answer the questions in order to get your certificate. Sign up to the Amazon webinar. We'll be back in July. And make sure you get our newsletter. Make sure you get our magazine, whether in print or in digital form. And please do give us your feedback. We can't invent. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We need your feedback in order to do a better job. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day and take care.